Hello and welcome to Burlington Progressives TV. My name is Carter Neubieser. I'm an at-large member of the Burlington Progressive Party Steering Committee and a community organizer here in Burlington. The Progressive Coalition was originally formed to help elect Bernie Sanders to be mayor of Burlington, and since then has become the most successful third party in the nation without accepting a dime of corporate campaign cash. Burlington Progressive Party TV will help highlight community members, activists, elected officials, and other folks in the community as they fight for economic, social, environmental, and racial justice. If you believe in our collective vision, please consider going to progressiveparty.org, I should say, and donating or getting involved locally to support progressive candidates and issues that we all care so much about. Tonight we're going to be talking with City Councilor Brian Pine from Ward 3. But in the meantime, I did want to highlight a few different things that are happening right now. It is the new year, so I did just want to touch upon some of my favorite moments from 2019, some moments that I found particularly frustrating, frankly. And I wanted to start with money in politics. There's been a huge effort right now in Burlington over the past couple of years to really increase the amount of money across the board that folks are spending on local races. So as someone who first got involved in politics and organizing on Senator Sanders' 2016 run as a volunteer organizer in my hometown of New Britain, Connecticut, I was really disappointed to see kind of folks raising just obscene amounts of money recently, a few months ago, kind of in the lead up to city council races here. It was really frustrating, and I've knocked over, since I've moved to Vermont, I've knocked a couple thousand doors in city council races for issue-based organizing, and I don't think I've ever once heard at the door that we need to be spending more money, especially more corporate money in our local races. It really should be something that's about values and issues and a debate about how to move our community forward. So it was something that I was really frustrated about. But yeah, I think that was the biggest thing. It was really frustrating to see, and I hope kind of moving forward we see more from people of every party really focused on issues and not necessarily raising big checks from some of the worst landlords in our community and some folks who maybe don't have the best interests of the entire community at heart. But like I said, we are going to be speaking with Ward 3 City Councilor Brian Pine tonight. He is an incumbent city councilor, a progressive, and someone who's also going to be seeking re-election in March. So Brian, welcome to Burlington Progressives TV. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Carter. It's good to be here with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I first thought I would kind of preface it. Last episode, we talked to three newcomers there was the first time running for office, and they're newcomers to the Progressive Party. So I wanted to start the same way, kind of generally, how did you first get involved in politics? I know you've been involved for many, many years and done a lot of different things in terms of really fighting for folks who are struggling to make ends meet and really focusing on those issues. So I wonder if you could just give us a little bit of background about yourself and how you first got involved.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
The opportunity that I had in 1981 was pretty unusual. I arrived a few months after Bernie Sanders was sworn in as our mayor, and that was his first term. And it really opened up politics to myself and many of my friends at the university. I think we were attracted to Bernie's message, and he was speaking to the issues that were front and center for us, which at the time were primarily global and international issues. We were really still in the arms race, and so we were very focused on nuclear disarmament. The U.S. government was committing atrocities in Central America, and many of us were organizing around that issue, raise awareness and try to stop what was a horrible foreign policy. And we found in Bernie, we found a mayor who not only took care of the basics of balancing the budget and repairing the streets and plowing the streets and providing public safety, but also a mayor who would speak on those issues which really resonated with students and myself included. So that was my first introduction to politics, really. Before that, I grew up in a fairly apolitical family. So it was a great awakening for myself and many others, and we were following closely what was happening in City Hall, which for students, I don't think it happened ever before, or maybe small numbers, but not in the numbers. So you would go to city council meetings, and previously meetings were held literally in an office, not in contours. So council meetings were never held. It was called the Board of Aldermen, and it was predominantly men, 1 or 2 women, very conservative Republicans and Democrats, and they teamed up to prevent Bernie from carrying out his agenda and his mandate the first term, and they really prevented him from hiring his own staff. They stood in the way of a lot of the things that he was attempting to do, and that galvanized the public, and it really galvanized the students. So I got involved registering students, turning out students for elections, and that was really my introduction to local politics. And so it went from there to more of a local focus as time went on. I found that, at the local level there was so much you could do to sort of tilt the scales in favor of those who are often left out, and that was what attracted me to the Progressives. And it was a coalition. Started out as the Independent Coalition, there was Citizens Party, there was Progressive Coalition for the longest period, and then it morphed into a party later.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think especially young folks like myself don't always know the history. I know I've spent the last couple of years learning it, and it's like, as a political nerd myself, it's extremely, extremely interesting, and definitely topical given kind of what's going on right now with Iran and kind of more international issues. So kind of turning a little more to the past couple of years, I think you first got on 2 years ago, or not the first time, but got onto the council.
Back.
Yeah, came back to the council once again. So I guess what have kind of been your priorities so far over the past 2 years, and you are running for re-election, so kind of what are you looking towards in the future, provided you win?
Yeah, I've had 3 really different experiences. My first term on the council was 91 to 93, and we had the mayor's office because we had Peter Clavell as mayor, and so we were really helping to advance the administration's agenda and trying to build coalitions with other members on the council, and that was largely pretty successful. And then he was defeated in 1993, and I served for 2 years under a Republican mayor, and I really like Peter Brownell. He's a good person. I didn't agree with him on very many issues, and we really went to battle on the issues, and we won some, we lost some, but I think it was a good opportunity to learn to be part of governing while you were the opposition.
Yeah.
And so that was an important lesson. We learned, I think, that that if you turn out dozens and dozens of people to a hearing or an event, it's going to have an impact. And so that was really a bit emboldened us a bit to turn people out. So that's what we did, and we continued to do that. And that was always Bernie's message, by the way, as well. I was active in the tenants' rights movement in the 80s, and Bernie would say, listen, I fully support what you're doing, but unless you can turn out 20 or 30 people, you won't be getting what you're looking for here. So learned hard the way that the strength in numbers and turning people out and collective action is what really results in meaningful change. So the last 2 years on the council, it's been, a totally different experience after maturing and going through most of my career, not all of my career, but working for the city for over 18 years, seeing it from a different perspective, and then leaving the city and then coming back in 2018. It continues to be, somebody asked me the other day, do you really enjoy it? And it's an interesting, I don't know how to answer that question because you don't necessarily do it to enjoy it.
Yeah.
You do it to have an impact and to hopefully make change that you're seeking to make. Or not. Some people don't want to make change, but my goal is to be part of, being an agent of change.
Yeah.
And so it sometimes is humbling how hard it is to actually move forward on an issue in a very meaningful way, in a way that you can actually talk to regular people and find out, is it affecting you? What we're doing, is that impacting you? Or are we just going to meetings and having debates and taking votes, and you're really not seeing a whole lot of change? So I think that's one of the most challenging parts about being a local elected official is the change happens actually pretty slowly.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I've noticed as well, and I think it's especially for young folks and organizers and just activists in general. I think something I'm learning more and more the more I'm involved is just the amount of time things take, even when you have people in the same room who agree on a certain value set, and kind of not just campaigning, but once you get into office, actually just the amount of research and time and thinking about different ways of talking about an issue and making sure that the process in which you're like developing policy is really inclusive. So I think that's a really good point. So I did want to talk about kind of moving forward. There's been, I think, for as long as I've been involved, and it sounds like for as long as you've been involved, a robust discussion around affordability. And I think even more so, there tends to be, at least in kind of the recent decade, in these last couple of years of it, there's been a real focus on climate. So I guess from your perspective, what can we kind of be doing that's tangible, that's doable, that we think will have the votes to pass, given the fact that we do have a mayor. We are the party in opposition, so to speak, in government right now. We don't have kind of a working majority on the council. So what can we be doing on those issues, and where have you seen success, and where have you seen, we just need to pick up more seats, we need to pick up the mayor's office?
Yeah, I think the issues where we can find common ground on are the ones largely around sort of the local climate agenda. We agreed as a council that there's a climate emergency. I think it was unanimous. Pretty sure it was unanimous. It might have been 11-1, but it was close to unanimous that we have a climate emergency and it's a crisis, and that we need to seek out local solutions, local innovative ways to impact that. I'm really focused on, and I believe most of the councilors would agree, that we need to find that just transition so that when we do make policy decisions, we're thinking about the impacts and maybe even unintended consequences on vulnerable members of this community, so that we don't, I want the burdens and the benefits of action on climate change to be shared equally. That's my focus. And if we basically stick it to somebody while they're already kind of down and make it hard for them, I think that's something we have to be really cautious about and find creative ways to mitigate that. If we need to come up with something that will make people's lives a little more difficult, we need to find a way to, I think, offset that and mitigate that.
Yeah.
So we might have a call here.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think we might have a call. And just as a reminder to folks, wherever the camera is, our number is just 802-862-3966, and I will do my best to work the phones properly. And it looks like we do have one call. And just as a reminder to everybody, and I gave this disclaimer last time, when we bring candidates on and we want to talk about issues, that's exactly what we want to do. We want to talk about issues, and we want to make sure that we're having a respectful dialogue. And I think that's something, regardless if we're on public access or in person or at a city council debate, that we're focused on. But let's attempt to work the phones properly. And hello, you're on the air.
Yes, I was just wondering, I don't know if Bernie was, if the Progressive Party was around when he was the first mayor, because in the 70s, he was part of the 70s, a good part of it, he was the Liberty Union with Peter Diamondstone. Right. And when he first ran, what did he win, in 1980 by 10 votes or something? But they might have come in the later part of his terms way back, and Clavel was. But I don't think in the beginning there was a Progressive Party. That was the late 80s at the earliest, I'm quite sure. I'd like to see pictures anyways, but I really seriously doubt it. But more importantly than that, when Clavel got in, how much money did he lose at the city retirement thing? And then with the city market getting in, I'll tell you, that was about Shaw's against city market. Who won the first time? Shaw's. And Shaw's said they were going to build the store. So the Progressives got together and had a thing where there'd be too much traffic. So they had to do it over. Of course, the city market won that time. And then Clavel had a thing going on where he had an extra tax. And he didn't call it an extra tax, but who caught him was Candace Page of the Burlington Free Prison in a big meeting. And he finally had to come out and admit it. So that was deception there. Then on the third time, the Burlington Telecom, that went on for, I don't know, how many years was Bob Kiss? And I'll tell you what, when you're a mayor and you have closed meetings, what you're doing is you're denying stuff to those people that voted for you, that campaigned for you and supported you and even volunteered for you. I thought that was the worst thing somebody could do, like a bunch of blind sheep. And Bob Kiss wasn't that much of a mayor anyways. That's why I had the name Kiss. Keep it stupid, stupid. I just think there's so much that the Progressives talk about one-sided. They don't admit the whole truth of the whole picture, and this is part of the other side, but it's only part of it. I'm not going to go on, but I'm sure you can understand my side of it, too. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And what was your name? Oh, I think we lost him there. Yeah.
But there was a lot there to cover.
Quite a bit.
I think he raised, I'll start in the beginning.
Yeah.
He's exactly right. There was no Progressive Party when Bernie was mayor. As a matter of fact, the coalition formed probably in the mid-'80s, because I was actually one of the first people that was hired very part-time just out of college in '85
Yeah.
to do some work for what was becoming the Progressive Coalition. So he's correct about that. The party formed actually quite a bit later in the late '90s even, I think, is when we formed as a party properly. However, I ran in '91 after both Terry Bericius and Tom Smith were elected to go to Montpelier as progressives, as that was the label designation at that time. So we used the designation progressive, but we did call it a coalition. And that continued, and Peter Clavell ran as independent in '89, was elected in '89 as independent, ran in '91 when I ran as a progressive, ran in '93 as a progressive, was defeated then, but came back to win again in '95 as a progressive. So there's a little bit of that history there, I think, is worth touching on. That alternative to the property tax that the caller mentioned is actually a really important point, and I would beg to differ that Peter denied it, because we had many public meetings where the franchise fee was discussed and explained. And just to summarize, the franchise fee is an attempt to get away from the property tax, which to fund city services continues to be a really regressive way to fund city services. It hurts lower income, fixed income people much harder, and it hits them harder than it does others. So Peter and Bernie always pushed for alternatives to the property tax. To summarize the franchise fee, it gets down to details, but I'll just try and do it.
Yeah, please.
$1 raised through the property tax was, at the time, roughly half from the homeowner and half from the business community, roughly 50-50. $1 raised from the franchise fee was half from the business community, 25 cents from the homeowner, and 25 cents from the big institutions like the university and the hospital that pays zero in property taxes. So I would argue that it was an incredibly innovative way to balance our budget without cutting services and without putting it on the homeowner and the business community to bring in the hospital and the university and federal government and state government. They all pay the franchise fee. So that's why the franchise fee is a more fair way to raise revenue. I would dispute that assertion that it was a secret. What happened with Shaw's, honestly, was that Shaw's, as a multinational corporation, came into Burlington and they picked their site on Pine Street and they wanted to rezone the land, but they knew they couldn't get it rezoned just south of the Maltex building, and they wanted to build a massive 50,000 square foot store there. And they knew they couldn't get it, but they were basically doing a bait and switch and saying, oh, no, we'll put it up on South Winooski. And so they won a bunch of people over. They never intended to build. They could not build a store less than 55,000 square feet. Yeah. Their formula was, we build 55,000 square foot boxes, and we know exactly how to lay them out. We have circulation exactly the same. We're not going to build a 17,000 square foot store. So that's the truth there, really. Shaw's pulled one over on people, and it was unfortunate. In the end, Shaw's hasn't proven to be a particularly great corporate citizen, really. So I wouldn't be looking to Shaw's as a great example. And in fact, that market serves a lot of people. People think it's an elite market, but in fact, the generic and everyday products are actually priced very competitively. So I think that's something really important to point out. And large percentage of people, almost 20% of the sales, go to people who are using food stamps. Yeah. So it tells you that who's actually using the store. It's a myth that it's just elite crunchy granola yuppies. That's just that's not true.
Yeah. Well, and this highlights something, that question highlights something I think is really important too, and something that I'm appreciating more and more that I'm involved. You specifically, but also a number of different folks involved in progressive politics, both directly with city council issues, but also statewide and also within the party itself, is that, and something that I really attribute to you is really having a kind of a depth of knowledge of the history, but in addition, really having a depth of knowledge of the issues really in depth, and really understanding how, there's the political side and actually passing policy, but then there's the bureaucratic side of, once you get it passed, how is it implemented? How are you working with government agencies, especially if the mayor isn't a progressive or isn't necessarily like-minded on a lot of issues? How do you parse that dynamic? And I think you, more so than most people on the council, frankly, in the Progressive Caucus, I think bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to that position. So it's something I definitely appreciate, and I think that just highlighted.
A bit of a local government nerd, I guess you could say. It's definitely in my blood, and it's something that I get a lot of satisfaction out of, because I see it as a way to again, tilt the scales a little bit in favor of people who government sometimes often forgets. And if we leave it to the market to solve our problems, I think many people are left behind. And I believe that government has a role to play. And I've just been incredibly lucky to be part of something where people believe in the idea of government as a force for good and as a force for change in the community.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome to hear.
So on some of the issues, I think one idea that around the basically moving more towards electricity as a form of energy and away from natural gas is going to require essentially a lot of getting homeowners and rental property owners to convert buildings from space heat provided or heat provided by natural gas to heat provided by air source heat pumps. And there's a cost to that, and that's a challenge. But there are models out there for how a municipal utility can finance those improvements for the property owner in a way that is essentially cost neutral. So because you save so much each month, you do have a new payment to pay off the equipment you've installed, but that payment is actually less than the amount you've saved. So if you save $50, but you're paying $45 to cover the financing, you have $5 in your pocket. Not a lot. You can get a couple cups of coffee, but still, it's something. So that's
Maybe
the
just
idea.
one at, like,
Maybe one at
Starbucks,
some places, right? Exactly. But that's called tariffed on-bill financing. It's still kind of it's not a new concept at all. It's a concept that hasn't taken off all over the country, but it has taken off in some places. And if we offered tariff-based financing in Burlington, I think it would be a huge shot in the arm for moving more towards renewables, because we are, theoretically, we're 100% renewable on the electricity side. So every time someone converts from natural gas to electricity, they're moving to a renewable energy source. So I think that's incredibly important. The other thing is 50% of our emissions comes from transportation. And that's not just true in the city, that's true statewide. Huge challenge with a largely dispersed sort of population where people are little pockets here, little pockets there. Burlington has the advantage, but we are a fairly small city. So 43,000 people, we're fairly densely packed together. Transit works really well here. It works really well in Winooski, and it starts to be less cost effective once you get outside of the urban core. But we really need to grapple with public transit, because making it more convenient. The price of the transit is important, but even convenience for people. If it's more frequent, so if you can catch a bus every 10 minutes, you're going to use the bus. And if we make it really more difficult to have a car downtown, people are going to use buses. So.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
it's really important that we look at that, and I think we'll find common ground. I really do. I don't think that's going to be a partisan issue. I really don't.
Well, that's good to hear, because I think the effects of climate change certainly aren't partisan in terms of who they're affecting.
That's right.
So that is good to hear. Quickly, I did want to touch upon, there's been a lot of media circus around kind of what's going on with the mayor's office and the police department and the resignation of our police chief. I guess there's dozens and dozens of articles, and if folks haven't already heard about it, I encourage them to check it out. But I wonder, kind of moving forward, seeing some of what the mayor's even described as like cultural problems and potentially cultural problems in leadership, but also there's been a lot of uproar just about transparency and communicating things to the public. I think kind of with an eye towards reform and kind of how we move forward as a community. What have you been, and I know it's still kind of developing, and there's always stuff coming out, it seems, but kind of moving forward, how do you think we kind of ameliorate these things so they don't happen in the future?
One idea that I'm open to, I'm not convinced yet that it's the right idea, but I believe it deserves full discussion in the community, is the idea of electing police commissioners. We have 7 commissioners now. We would need to have 8, and then it gets odd because then you have a tie sometimes, but we can figure that out. That's details, but the concept is democratically elected, every ward gets a commissioner. Maybe you add a 9th commissioner who gets elected citywide. That's just one idea. I just sort of threw that out there, but that would really change the level of accountability. It could. I mean, it doesn't always, right? So I think that's been out there. That's being discussed. That's one idea. We absolutely need a clear social media policy in all city departments. And that is been taking too long. We've been dragging our feet as a city, and as a city councilor, I'll take some responsibility for that. We should have done it long ago. So.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think there's a ton of other issues we could unpack, and it's definitely even that one as well. We could dive in really deep.
A whole show on that.
I know
we could easily
do an hour and a half on that.
We could easily.
But we are running out of time though, so I did want to thank you for coming
Thanks
in
for having
and
me.
speaking with us and talking about some issues that you're focused on. But I want to thank all of you at home as well for joining us. This has been another episode of Progressive Party TV. This was our 4th episode, and we, as always, are airing new episodes the first Friday of every month, live at 5:25 here on Channel 17. And I want to thank, as always, Channel 17 for having us. Once again, though, the Progressive Party is the most successful third party in the nation, and are electing folks up and down the ballot throughout this state without a dime of corporate campaign money. So if these are issues that we've talked about tonight that you agree with, or issues that we've talked about in the past, please consider going to progressiveparty.org, donating, becoming a monthly donor. That's what allows us to fund our movement, because we do reject any corporate money or big money of any kind. So thank you again for tuning in, and thanks again to Channel 17. Hope everybody has a good night. Bye now.